honor to be here, and thank you for continuing to reach out to be in this connection. I feel my internet might be going in and out, so I'm actually going to talk and walk so I can get closer to the router because I don't want this to be interrupted in any way. This is fullest expression, everyone. We get to be present with the technology, the beauty and the challenge of technology, and how you and I have tried to meet up, right?
Yes, yeah. And I might have not even been able to record the first 5 minutes, so you go. If we can't get it right, we will get it.
We're going to get it. I'm just switching my internet right now, so it might go black for just a moment.
That's fine. While you're switching, I'm going to reintroduce you because I might have not even been recording at that time. So let me just say this is Reverend Briana Lynn, someone who I'm intimidated both by and inspired by her wisdom and her knowledge and her passionate delivery. And we're going to talk about who she is and what she's all about. And we're going to dive into some questions and some wisdom that are kind of near and dear to my heart. And so I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Amazing. And you can see me and hear me okay? We're good on this side now?
Yes, I can see you.
Great. Amazing. Yeah, thank you for inviting me in, Jessica. I just appreciate being a part of this conversation, and want to be super clear that the basis of who I be and this magic that flows through me has a lot to do with creating circles and not pyramids, and the concept of power with each other and not power over. And so a lot of what I'm going to share can be information heavy, and for a lot of people that can get intimidating, feeling like they need to remember the things I say. My gift is in transmission, not information. So there's nothing you or anyone watching, you don't need to remember anything I say, but truly just let the body, let the spirit system receive the energy of the words and the message that flows through me. I feel like I am a keeper of this message, but I don't feel like it is my message. It was Jesus's message. It was Buddha's message. It's the message of the trees. It's what the rivers sing all the time. And so it's not a personal thing. I'm not here to promote my brand. I'm not here to promote my courses. And while I do have a brand and have courses, I believe in magnetism, not promotion. I believe in being a beacon, not a brand. And so this communication, this intention is just to be in the conversation of how to continue to support each other in that beaconing. And also some of the pieces that we were talking about before you press record of like, how can we support those who are just starting to wake up to the fact that we are light. We're here to bring light. What does that mean now? Holy shit, the majority of our planet is not operating from that paradigm. Mm-hmm. What do we do? So I'm excited for the deepening of the conversation. And in the introduction, you introduced me as Reverend Briana Lynn, which is my name on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and Clubhouse and all the places at Rev Briana Lynn. And it's a funny title to have. Because it is so associated with the church, and there are beautiful things about church, and myself and many people that I work with have a lot of trauma around church and the pain that has been caused by not being able to fit inside of a box that was given to me from a very young age. So I acknowledge that the title that I have chosen is activating. Mm-hmm. And it goes right along with kind of my personality and the message that flows through me. It's not a neutral one. Mm-hmm. It's very much activating us to take a stand for our planet and for each other. So the big why around the title Reverend has really a lot more to do with reverence and understanding that my work is to be done in activation of supporting other leaders. I'm a leader who's interested in working with other leaders. I'm not interested in followers. I'm not interested in disciples or and all the students that I work with. I really acknowledge them that they are also here to teach me, whether it's in interpersonal or ultimately with their gifts. So the word Reverend, I did my Reiki training and my Reiki master, oh my gosh, 2009. 2008 and 2009. And at that time, my Reiki teacher suggested that I get my ministerial ordination so that we could be protected It started as protection. Our First Amendment right is our right to religious expression. And so under the context of a church or religion, there is a lot of protection for us as healers. And so that's why we developed ultimately the Earth Temple and a church. We are a nature-based church here in Southern California and many places around the world that focuses on allowing our healing arts, our shamanic arts, to be put in the context of a religion and a church, not because we want to create a religion or a church, but because the current paradigm protects and understands that vocabulary. So am I a reverend, like I stand for this tradition and this is what I believe in? No, I'm a reverend because I have reverence for life and because it protects my ass in a world where healers and coaches and transformational leaders are not protected by the law. So I said, then I'm going to use the law in the ways that we can to protect ourselves.
We're all doing that.
So, so I respect the name and I respect the education and the time that it took me to get to that place. And the number one reason why I use it is because in the United States, we live in an authoritarian government that is not interested in personal expression unless it goes along with status quo. Right. So as soon as our expression starts to go outside of what has been deemed safe for the American identity, we are targeted. I have been targeted. And so the word reverend gives me some spatial parameters for safety, for self in my community, and ultimately my children.
Thank you for explaining that. I mean, that like makes absolute sense. Just what I know about healing and medicine and all of that. So yeah. Okay. So a couple things I'd love to dive into is what your programming was as a child and what have you had to transcend in order, you know, what layers have you had to shed in general with your programming and at what point, maybe an age or what was the catalyst? Because, you know, there's everyone I talk to on this path, there's some catalyst, something that happens that begins that journey inward. So I'm curious what that was for you and what that was like.
Beautiful. Yeah. Definitely working through the programming, right? Like still, I like to say it's a spiral path, right? Like the circles get smaller, but they never disappear until you die. Like you've got the programming, you've got it for life. It can shift a lot so that the behaviors are no longer from that place of the programming, but it will get activated as far as I know for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely.
Who knows? Maybe one day it'll all be gone, but as far as I know,
constant
from my
integration.
deep elders, it's still programming. So I would say I was raised by two incredible humans, my mom, Susie, and my dad, Randy, and I just deeply, deeply honor them. Not perfect and deeply loving. My dad was a farmer when we were growing up. And so my relationship with life had a lot to do with dirt and being with my dad and being around the plants and understanding cycles and understanding timing. And my rejection of my family, which we all go through, it's a necessary part of our development, was a rejection of those cycles, was a rejection of that. And I went deep into academia. So my revolution for my family was to be a really good student. I was bad in that way. Like they're very connected to the earth. They stay at home. There's a real like old traditional, like none of my sisters moved out until they were married kind of thing. I'm the oldest of 4 girls. So there was a lot of layers of working with that. When I was around 15, I was in my English class and I had an experience. I was at the time really questioning my participation in the religion that I was raised in. I was raised in a brand of Christianity. It's definitely a brand called Calvary Chapel. They're evangelical born again Christians. And while very loving, and there's a space for community and the desire to be together. And I believe a deep desire within a lot of the leadership to follow the Christic example of what it means to be a teacher of teachers. That's what the Christ is. Christ means teacher. I am a Christ. You are a Christ. Congratulations. We're all Christ. While I felt a lot of that and have done a lot of forgiveness work and healing work around that, the biggest piece that was really imbued and a problem and is still challenging for my life is the need to be perfect or the need to be good or the need to be godlike or the need to be anything other than what I am. I don't even need to define it. Any paradigm that tells us we should be somewhere else than right here is not the paradigm to function in.
Right.
The only pieces that I'm interested in are the things that bring me more here.
Right. Present.
That's it. Right here. This is where the magic happens. This is infinity. This is the magnanimous moment of everything happening right now. So anything that takes me away from this, even if it's something beautiful or spiritual or whatever, all of my practices, all of my life now is orienting towards getting more present here with you. So there came a point in my religion where it was very much about a philosophy or a dogma, and it was taking me away from my experience of God. I was in this English class having kind of these thoughts around infinity and death. I did a lot of death meditations, especially when I was an early teenager. And some of it was from a place of trauma and suicidality, and some of it was from a place of really wanting to understand infinity outside of like a heaven and hell concept. And so meditation on death, I'm there meditating on death. And the next time I open my eyes, I am a conscious awareness, watching my conscious awareness, watching my body, and noticing all the other students' consciousness awareness is watching them as they're watching their own bodies. And I was just kind of like a 15-year-old born again Christian having an out of body existential experience. And so when I was able to come back into my body, I couldn't even explain what had happened. But that moment showed me that there was an aperture in our reality, that the things that I could sense with my five senses are limited. They're beautiful. It's a human experience. I celebrate that. And they're limited in definition to what and who we are as beings. So from there, I just became famished with learning about who and what we are, and went deep into the academic route, went straight into college out of high school, and then went to South America quite a few times. I studied socioeconomics in Latin America because I wanted to understand the intersection between the conversation of finances, indigenous culture and spirituality, and women. And so most of my academic studies has to do with water rights, indigenous rights, conversation amongst like more urban culture versus more earth-based cultures, and the intersections of how urban cultures and technologies can support earth-based cultures, and how earth-based cultures can support urban cultures, and that the conversation is actually between the two, not one or the other, but it's actually an interchange of goods and ideas. So that's my academic background, my bachelor's degree, and then I have my master's degree from the United Nations University for Peace and Peace Education, which was a deeper extension of the conversation between Earth peoples and the urbanized peoples, if you will, and how to connect. But the big impetus that came after that was, there were so many of them.
Yeah,
but I would say that
many along your path.
The next big one was I just finished a yoga teacher training and went to Costa Rica. This was in 2008. End of 2007, early 2008, and sat with plant medicine in a big ceremony. I'd sat with psilocybin before and sat with San Pedro, and there were somewhat of a ceremony around both of those experiences, but this was the first time that it was a 6-day initiation. I just turned 23, and so it was a very it was huge. It was huge. It changed my life with yahe, ayahuasca, with an Ecuadorian tribe.
That's some serious
medicine. Serious medicine. And what really came through for this one was that the path of healing must be fully integrated into nature. That the idea that we as human beings are not nature, or that the church as a structure could somehow be indoors, for me felt very off.
Right.
That part of my message is about getting people like back out here. Like that's actually, if all we had was our breath and water and some trees, we could do all the healing work that we need. And that's what plant medicine has ultimately taught me. Even though I now support and facilitate in different plant medicine roles, the number one thing that they teach me is that we are with you so that one day we don't have to be with you. The idea of plant medicine isn't to take plant medicine and then take plant medicine forever. The idea is to sit with it, not even take it, sit with it, have the healing, have the revelations, and then become of service to the ultimate oneness, whereby we wouldn't be needing the plant medicines, that we would learn the healing, we would learn the techniques, we would learn the process to integrate, where the big catharsis wouldn't be needed all the time anymore. And so my work as a medicine woman is the medicine of life, and really getting in touch with the authentic flow of what is, and learning how to teach, how to express from that place. Plant medicines is one ally out of many. And like you mentioned, I work with neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. I do somatic therapeutic, getting in the body work, breath, sound, movement, and touch, I find are the greatest tools for integrating any human experience. The number one thing that I see people suffering with is the inability to integrate human emotion. we just don't know how to have an emotional experience without it meaning something about us.
Right.
Myself included. It's my number one thing, right? Our number one challenge is the thing we get to teach. I support and teach people how to have a human experience without it meaning anything about their identity.
Right.
And that's where all suffering comes from, is when I begin to identify with my experience. I am blank because of blank. Right. I am great because I know how to manifest abundance, or I am horrible because I am broke, are both fallacies.
Right.
Neither of them are true. And so much of what I see in kind of like the new age industry is this idea of like, you're doing spirituality right if ... you can manifest your partner, if you can manifest abundance. I'm like, that's still the 1950s capitalism
like
push.
Makes my skin crawl. That entire spirituality just has always grated on me. And I'm so thankful that already was there, where I didn't even have to do the work. I'm like, ugh, that just feels so incredibly wrong. It's all over. It's all over Instagram too, unfortunately.
All over. And it's funny. I look at like, Fortune 500 companies saying like, you're doing the right corporate thing if you have these kinds of results. And the new cage industry, we'll call it, has the same kind of energetics around like, if you meet these marks, you know that you're doing spirituality right.
It's like achievement based, but I think it suits well for those that can't quite bust out of the matrix. Let's take the spirituality and somehow integrate it into these achievement based format. And it's making it's making a lot of money and a lot of followers on Instagram. And it's like, it's a lot. Yeah. It's like I call it prosperity doctrine. I don't know. That's just like the language I give to it, but it's like a false prophet speaking, and it's sucking people in right and left. But I'm glad you're speaking to that, because I think it's incredibly important.
It reminds me a lot of Scientology, to be completely honest. I don't know if you've done any research into Scientology.
I've done a little bit, probably not as much as you, but
that whole idea of like, you can move up the bridge, you can move up the ladder if you do this prayer, if you buy this program, if you work with this coach, if you know this name, if you've been on this podcast and you wear these clothes, and
just setting people up for failure. And attachments, and just attachments-based spirituality. It's like no different. It's ugh. Yeah. So I have a question that's kind of on the plant medicine realm, because I do pre-integration work with people who just straight up have fears. They have a call to the medicine, but they're worried about how they're going to integrate back into their world. And that's always the big thing, which, is great that you brought up, that it's really your environment needs to support the vision of the work that you're doing, which ultimately is reconnecting to self, reconnecting back in nature. But for a lot of people, they don't have the life construct at this point without a complete overhaul to go live in a teepee, in nature. I know I could do it, and I'm actually working towards a more minimalistic life that will support that, even in some degree, whether it's all the time or part-time. But for people that can't seem to break free of that, they're so tied in generationally since the turn of the century. What guidance would you give to somebody who is scared of what the integration would be like? They're drawn to plant medicine, they have a high emotional intelligence, they can grasp concepts really quickly, they can embody wisdom, and they're on a spiritual path, but it's like they get butted up against, how am I going to integrate back in? Like, am I going to be in a place of utter dysfunction? And so I'm just curious if there's anything that you can speak to from your experience about that integration process, what that will be like coming back into whatever it is that they've left before they go to the medicine.
That's a beautiful one. The medicines are miraculous, right? Psilocybin, kambo, bufo, ayahuasca. These are the main ones that I personally work with, and they're incredible. However, while they have their own intelligences and their abilities to heal, what they really are is just a quartz crystal. They're not going to do the heavy lifting. And what a quartz crystal is they're in our phones, they're in our computers. It literally just amplifies energy. What quartz crystal does, it just amplifies energy. It's not good, it's not bad, but whatever's already there, it's going to bring it into full focus. So my suggestion in the precursor leading up to plant medicine is clear everything that you're expecting the medicine to clear for you first.
Right.
Clear up all your relationships, clear up all your finances, get real with your body and the bullshit you're putting into it. Notice the addictive patterns and the places that want to be catalyzed before you come in. Have a rising ritual. If people don't have a rising ritual, if you're not doing some form of something, it doesn't have to be meditation, breath, sound, movement, touch every day with the intention of making a prayer about it. If you're not doing that, in my opinion, there's no fucking reason why you should be sitting with plant medicine. You do not have a personal relationship with spirit and you expect the plant to do the work for you.
Right.
The Italian mama is like, you deserve to get your ass handed to you.
Right.
You go figure that out. Because what the plants are going to tell you is pretty much, there are very, very special moments where the plants will reveal something that you had no idea about. It's amazing. It's the only thing I never even knew.
Right.
Very rare. 1 out of 1,000.
Right. But overall, if you're not intentionally living and you're not in a space of self-connection and craving it like you frickin' brush your teeth every morning, which I'm at that place. And the medicine just enhanced that and made me more disciplined, more ritualistic, more intentional with every single human I interact with. And so if you're not already engaged in that, you're saying like you're ultimately fucked and you're going to be, it's probably like a little bit like Pandora's box in that sense. And so you need to kind of have that practice and that footing before you're going to go and see
90 days, minimum 90 days, 3 months before you go sit prep, minimum 90 days. Know what the dieta is, know what the food that's going to be good for the body that not only correlates with that medicine, but correlates with what we already know.
Right, exactly,
Number 2, get someone to support you like you, Jessica, or someone in your life, a coach, a mentor, someone that you are asking for honest reflection about the shit that you can't see. And number 3, have a rising ritual, have a meditation, have something that you show up for with yourself that's dedicated to your relationship with the infinite. And those 3 pieces would be the 3 main things that I see that people miss a lot of times. And then they come back from the plant medicine and a month later, their life is exactly the same. And they're like, but why?
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. That was an amazing answer. So as we're talking about medicine and, low frequency energies and, vibing out all of these things not serving us, there's a lot of shame energy in people that I'm guiding people out in the world, collective shame. And in a lot of ways, it can affect people from truly stepping on to their spiritual path. And I'm curious how you would speak onto somebody who is riddled with shame, hasn't even shared their journey with anyone, or hasn't stepped into this work because they're just in that low frequency space. Like, what are some tools to navigate some intense shame that could be propagated from like 20 years of religious indoctrination, sexual abuse, addiction, like these lifelong things where we're sitting in this numbing, to avoid the trauma response? What would you say to people that are perhaps listening, that are sitting in these spaces where they just can't fucking move? They can't find their way out.
Yeah. I get it. I've been there. Like, I think out of all of the horrible things that colonization and corporatization and domination has done to our planet is the lie that we're supposed to do this on our own, or that we could. We actually can't. We actually need each other. Just going to put that out there. Not as codependency, but interdependency. We actually can't do this alone. So I find that people who are in a shame cycle or who are in a stuck cycle, like, don't have tribe or don't have people that they can talk to. Hire someone, hire a coach, hire a therapist, and start doing shame inventory, fear inventories, like speak it, write it, dance it, move it. And if you can't hire someone or you're not there yet, dedicate 5 minutes a day where you just write out the problem and process of shame is that it's a magnet. Once it's in the system, now my system is coding for all the places where I can be shame. And other than like shame and fear, the only other like as addictive sensation is love. Shame is very addictive because it gives us someone to blame, whether it's ourselves or someone else. But oftentimes with shame, it's blaming ourselves as the perpetrator or as the one who can't do the thing. And blame is a very addictive energy because it gives us a place to put our energy that's supposed to be for our mission, that's supposed to be in action, that's supposed to be on the edge of living life. It gives us a place to put that energy without doing anything. So we take all this life force energy and shoot it at ourselves. It's like literally taking a bow and arrow and then standing in front of it. and letting it go right at ourselves. And so it's all this built up energy. Your life force energy, my life force energy is meant for giving. Right? It's meant literally for giving away. So the process, the antithesis to shame is forgiveness of self, of others. And how can I give this energy away? When I start to get in my own shame loops, which I have, most of my shame loops are around love and acceptance from people who I'm specifically romantically attracted to. So my shame loops come when I feel unloved or unmet by people who I'm romantically attracted to or in a romantic relationship and not meeting me there. My shame, I love how Brent Brown calls it shame gremlins, because it just gives it like, that's when they start to chew. And then they give me all the lists of all the other things that I could and should be ashamed about. So understanding that shame is a magnet and finding a way to express that emotion, because what it actually is the desire to share something precious. Shame comes online when your life's mission is aligned with a pattern that's ready to be completed in your life. And you can choose to go down to shame and to blame myself, or to actually look at this and feel it fully and then recapture that energy so that it can be for my life. And there are times where I choose the shame path. I'm not perfect. For sure. I go down shame cycles, but more and more and more in my life, as I continue to be of service and choosing the mission, choosing love, shame always develops into an acknowledgement of a place where I haven't met myself in the past. How can I meet this self here? So that would be the first step. If you're in a shame cycle and you don't feel ready to reach out to tribe or to a coach or to a therapist, it would be to sit down with a journal and just ask the question of your shame. What do you really want to express? On the other side of shame is your mission. On the other side of shame is your mission, 100%. And shame is the armor of the part of us that does not want to change. We all have it. We all have resistance to change. Resistance to change is resistance to life, is resistance to death. Okay. So that part of us that wants to use an excuse to stay in our non-change, even though we can't, to stay in our little hovels, is going to use shame as our battle weapon, as our shield to actually doing the thing that we're here to do.
And push people away in the process that are trying to show up and love us too. I always say, like, we heal relational wounds and relational wounds in relationship, and we heal in community. We can't do it alone. It's a fallacy. Like whenever it's like self-healer, self-help, I'm like, okay, to some degree, yes, but ultimately you have to connect to other people. You have to be vulnerable. You have to share and create that connection. And then you end up finding people who have the same fucking story you do. And you're like, oh, we're all the same. We're all healing. So thank you for that. That was eloquently, beautifully, poetically expressed.
Thank you, Jessica. These are great questions.
Yeah, I love, that's just like, I got to ask that one because that one's just so alive for me personally right now. War on drugs. So we can either dive into that one. I'd love to just hear anything, any wisdom, anything that you'd like to share, because people always ask because they don't, I mean, I dove into every single bit of book and wisdom and podcast to understand what's happening with the, system-based war on drugs. And people always ask me, why is this illegal? And look what it's doing, and elevates consciousness, and why? So I have a bit of my own answers, but I'd love to hear you express anything on the subject of the war on drugs and what it is and why is it here? What does it mean? What is it doing?
Yeah, it's great. This is a really great question to ask me because my background is in studying in Latin America, and that term was actually coined in the late 80s by sweet Nixon Pixon, in order to give us more political and international justification for our illegal presence in Latin America. The United States has been illegally in Latin America since the 1930s. And we've been doing a couple things. One, our corporations, the United Fruit Company and Banana Republic, are there illegally harvesting food from indigenous lands. So that's number one. Number two is rubber tapping. We've basically rubber tapped over a third of the Amazon rainforest. Number three is cheap labor. The Latin America has been a place where the United States corporations has set up all sorts of different industries, from clothing to shoes to plastic goods, and paying the workers a very, very low wage, hiring children in what are called fair trade zones. And then finally, these drugs, right? Specifically cocaine. And I lived in Bolivia for 8 months the first time, and then another 5 months when I was leading a trip down there. So I've spent some time in there. Peru. I lived in Medellin in the early 2000s, which was a center of cocaine running from Colombia all the way to the United States. And so what I've gotten to learn politically, historically, is that the war on drugs was basically a justification for the United States military's presence throughout Latin America, for them to enforce the corporate interests of American companies that the United States government had debts to.
Mm-hmm.
So the war on drugs really doesn't have anything to do with drugs originally. It has to do with military presence and economic control. And so please know, every war on the planet right now that the United States is involved in has nothing to do with anything other than economic interests.
Love it.
That's it. So now what we have in the United States are a lot of policies and these strata that they created called schedules, Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, that were created to give some sort of weight to what kind of drug it was and what kind of penal results could be if someone were found guilty for possessing, selling, running, etc., these drugs. So we've seen these drugs get kind of pushed around of their goodness, their badness, what they're used for, things like that. In, the 1919, you could have gone to any soda fountain in the United States and ordered a Coca-Cola, and they would have put a little droplet of cocaine powder in your beverage. So to go from something like that to now you have that same amount found on you at any time, you could be arrested on the spot. So just to understand that the term drug is relative to the person using it. Drugs are not drugs because we name them that. Drugs are drugs because they're either can be sold as a pharmaceutical commodity, or they're considered Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3 illegal by the US government, which justifies them to arrest people, arrest certain types of people and not others. Also in the late 70s, we saw an influx of cocaine in the urban centers. And what has been discovered, Edward Snowden talks about this quite a bit, it was that the US government, specifically the FBI and the CIA, were implanting cocaine into Black communities in the 70s in order to get them addicted. And they did the same thing with heroin, and they did the same thing with speed, where they gave out free drugs to urban communities in order to criminalize specifically Black men. So the war on drugs is also a war on keeping racism alive. When racism is alive, the actual issue, which is economies, which the actual issue is who has the money, cannot be spoken about. When racism is on our front lines, we actually can't address the issue at hand, which is capitalism and corporatism. Martin Luther King was not murdered until he started talking about dismantling capitalism. 3 months after he made his first speech on dismantling capitalism, he was murdered. There had been murder attempts before that, but not like this. And so his assassination, for me, is a representation of the racial disparity in our country. But more than anything, racism, specifically with the African Americans in the United States, really began with the advent of slavery and that system. But the corporate strata of keeping the haves and the have-nots away from each other and keeping the majority of people as a slave race to a small group of people has been around for about 8,000 years. And racism is a tool of domination. Racism is not domination. Racism is a tool of domination. So as long as we're distracted by the war on drugs or this race war or anything, we actually can't address the issue, which is a fact. 1% of the planet owns 80% of our natural resources. And most of them aren't white men. Most of them are Chinese. Most of them are Dubai princes. Most of them are people that we couldn't even put our finger on. The majority of the wealth on this planet is not owned by white men, people. We need to address white supremacy. Absolutely. As a white presenting person, I will stand by that fully. And if we actually want to talk about the issues of what is murdering our planet and what is keeping us at war with each other, we need to look at that top 1% of wealthy on the planet and start to deconstruct our relationship with wealth and money. Stat. That is the center of all of the socioeconomic and war issues on the planet. And the war on drugs is just one example. War on terrorism. Like, don't even get me started. Anytime war on blank gets made, it basically means we're going to create policy that says anyone who has drugs A, B, and C, we can take away all of their rights and do whatever the fuck we want to them.
Right. Thank you for speaking so bravely on this. This is part of the reason why I get fucking shadow banned. Anytime I go on the fringe of the edge of this, and I know I can't even do it in the level of eloquence that you could do, but even in a post, it's like all of a sudden I vanish, you know? And so thank you for sharing all this. Obviously it's it's brave, and it's anti-system, and I fucking love it. Anything else you want to add while you're going? Because I'm gonna take it to like the hour, because I just don't want to shortchange picking your soul.
Okay. Thank you. I was like trying to be aware, because I know we started the recording.
Let's just let it go.
So I was like, okay,
we're just gonna let it go. Fuck IGTV.
Okay. I love it. So the other piece that I would say on the war on drugs is there is a piece around, psychedelics and entheogens, and these pieces being able to support people's awakening consciousness. But I do not feel that that is the main concern of the government. Or it's not even of the government, it's of the corporations and of the people who have the money, because the government actually is not the one making the decisions. I know it's a big shocker to everyone, but it doesn't actually matter who's in office.
Hands up the government's asses by the money.
Yeah. It doesn't matter who's in the office around these types of policies. Who's in the office is more of a social wink to our culture. Than it is actually someone who can make decisions from their own morality or from their own virtue.
I have a hard time conceptualizing how thick people's programming is to not see beyond that veil of reality. It seems so obvious, but when I talk to certain, they're like, oh, well, I can agree to disagree. I'm like, no, but it's the truth. Like I have a hard time understanding how you can't see the show that's going on, and how you actually believe that who you vote into office is going to make these particular changes. But that's a whole nother thing. And for people who, I've been there at various points in my life of like what I would have to change about myself, my behaviors, and my ways of being if I were to admit. Right. Yeah.
We love our credit cards. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, it's nice to be able to drive a car to the grocery store.
Right. Yeah.
All of that is built on slavery.
Right.
If we really got down to it,
we would drink
American
coffee.
people.
I'm opening people's eyes.
Chocolate.
Yeah.
Cacao. We talk about cacao in the New Age industry.
Right.
Most of the cacao that is grown on our planet is harvested by children slaves in Ghana, in Ecuador, and Peru. I've been there. I've seen it.
Right.
The cacao that's being used in these cacao ceremonies for good New Age white people in their yoga studio.
Right. Yeah.
Did you know child slaves made that cacao? Are we gonna have a conversation about that? And so like knowing sourcing and like the work that it takes to know sourcing of product, and
it's a full-time job. It is.
It's a full-time job. So I get the hesitancy to want to pull on that string. It's like the whole sweater is gonna unravel, and it's
totally. Oh yeah, it's already unraveled in my world. I'm like, where did that come in? What am I? I want to trace everything back, every bite of food, everything. And it's like, I have to take a year off just to source every single thing that I'm participating in as a consumer. So yeah, I understand. That makes sense. Yeah.
It's
so
go ahead.
Just
that I don't judge anyone for where they're at anymore. Like I'm really mindful around who I allow into my personal space, but it's I get that everyone, in my heart of hearts, I do believe people are making the best decisions based on the information that they receive, and also for where they're at just in their own capacity for initiating change. Change is going to happen, and we're either participating, initiating, or resisting.
Right. And when I'm in my highest self, that is my mantra. When I'm not, I know it's like time to disconnect from looking at the collective shit show and go, okay, what's in it for me? And you've reminded me of that a few times. What is some wisdom for the ages when it comes to like what separation from spirit is, like for the newbies awakening that are lost and alone, that are listening and are inspired and maybe even perhaps overwhelmed, noting, it's about whatever's, the transmission is, they're not going to take in all that information. I've heard you say that at the beginning of some of the videos that I've watched, and I'm like, so glad that you've done that. Cause I'm just like, oh my gosh, like so much information, so overwhelming. So what would you share, as just somebody who is inspired by listening and wants to get on some path and connect to their spirit? What does that mean to you? And what's a way to begin besides the obvious spiritual practice? And what does that look like? Anything you can share in that realm?
Yeah, love it. Thank you. the spiritual path I'm learning, the spiritual path is being ever more present in my sensory experience, right? So like literally in my body in this now moment, what wants to be present here? What wants to be said here? What's the thing? Right. And for it's so hard because it's like, what's the thing that can get people moving? Breath, sound, movement, and touch is the thing that I constantly go back to. If you're a newbie on the path and you want to get in touch with yourself, breathe consciously. My favorite is the 4-part breath. Inhale for 4, you hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold it out for 4. You can look it up on YouTube, all the things. 4-part breath. It's simple, easy breath work just to begin. They teach it to sharpshooters. They teach it to the Dalai Lama, like 4-part breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And that helps regulate the nervous system. That helps gets us in touch, because a lot of the reasons why people don't want to be present is because the nervous system isn't calibrated to steadiness. So the 4-part breath can help us just calibrate to steadiness. Sound, toning.
Hear that? Can you demonstrate?
Yes.
Can you just demonstrate? I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, great. I'm like busting out my flute with breath all the time, but I have a little breath thing. But I'd love to do that with you.
4-part breath is great. It's also called the box breath. So you can look up either one of those on other things. There's great tutorials. But this is super easy. So we're just going to inhale for 4. Hold it in. And exhale. Hold it out. Inhale. Hold it. Exhale. Hold it. One more time. Inhale. Hold it. Exhale. And hold it. And just breathe normally. And that's the 4-part breath, and just allows us to get back in the body, recalibrate, be present. And it's a great introduction to breath work, especially if people aren't ready to do like breath of fire or the cathartic shamanic breath stuff, which always has me going to tetany and things like that. Simple breath work, being conscious of our breath. If you can breathe, you can choose. If you can't breathe, you can't choose.
Right.
Being spiritual is having a co-created experience with what's happening right now. Breath is the basis of being able to show up to co-create with the universe. I cannot show up with any of my tools if I cannot breathe. So if you can breathe, you can choose. Okay, so that's one. Sound, learning how to make sound, ugly sounds, pretty sounds, tones. That level of frequency activates the vagus nerve, which is our largest nerve that goes from the center of our pineal gland all the way down the front side of our body into our stomachs and controls our literal digestion. Making sound every day that is not talking, that is toning. Mantras are vital for your physical health. It's not even a spiritual practice, just for your physical digestive system. Making sounds is good for your belly. It also gets us connected to spirit. Spirit is sound. Frequency, energy is life. So when you make a sound, you're literally.
Oh, I lost you. Ah, where did you go? Don't know where you went.